morning. Yeah, so the theme that we have selected today is insecurity, and insecurity is something that would already impact our life today, or that will impact our lives in some moment. So, and that was a challenging topic for me because I feel insecure about myself in a lot of like different parts of my life, and I feel like even being here is something that makes me uncomfortable. So that's why it's good to always like try to confront like your insecurities, right? So what we but before we start talking about insecurity itself, I want to ask you guys a question. But I want to ask you guys a question, and I want you to think about the question before you answer. So, what is the essential goal of Spiritism? Like, just think for like a moment. What is like? Why do we study Spiritism? So, and then instead of me answering, I'll let Kardec answer. There's a little book that anybody that wants to learn more about Spiritism that is very good. It's called Spiritism in its simplest expression. And then Kardec answers that question saying the essential goal of Spiritism is human improvement. In it, one must only seek for what can help in the moral and intellectual progress. So that's the main goal for Spiritism. Is really, we're not here to study Kardec or to think like, oh yeah, Kardec was this great guy, and we kind of like put him like in a throne and kind of worship Kardec. No, that's not the goal. The goal really is human improvement. And I think like one of the major differences between Spiritism and some of the other religions that also believe in Christ is that we, like, when we think about Christ, we don't think about the person Christ, but what the teachings that he brought to us. Not necessarily like himself. Of course, like we use him as an inspiration to guide us. But the major difference is that we don't worship Jesus itself. We worship like his actions and like his teachings. So I think that's the major difference between Spiritism and the other religions, because like this is the goal. It's human improvement. And and then when you think like what is the relationship between insecurities and human improvement? Insecurities are something that can block your human improvement. So that's why we decided to bring and to do this talking today, because it's something that impacts all of us. Like I said, it's either impacting us right now, or it will impact us at one point of our life, or it has already impacted us. And it's something that it can come from like past lives, but it can also come from like our existing life here on Earth. So I think that's why it's important. And also, like, a lot of people think like, oh yeah, human improvement, maybe if I have a lot of faith, I can deal with everything, right? So people, a lot of like other religions, they say, oh yeah, if you have faith, you have everything. But that's, so in reality, so the question that I'll ask you guys is, faith enough? Like, if you're a person of faith, yeah, have a lot of faith. But is that enough, right?
Action.
Yeah. So what again? Referencing Kardec, Spiritism faith is only useful for those who can say we are better today than we were yesterday. So, and that comes with the action, right? So faith is important, and faith we need to have faith, and we need to apply that faith into day to day. Because having faith is when you start taking those teachings that we're getting, and we apply that to your life. That's real faith. It's not just like, oh yeah, I really believe in God, I have the faith, everything's gonna turn out great. Yeah, eventually it will, but if you do your part, right? Like nothing happens by itself, you need to apply yourself. So, I wanted to bring those two topics before we start digging more into the insecurity itself. So, so the other question is, what is insecurity? So, if you look at the dictionary, they say it's a tendency to lack confidence or certainty in oneself, and may be experienced by most of the people regarding some aspect of their life. So, like I said, I have my own insecurities, about my, my health and sometimes like other aspects of my life, and everybody has some sort of like insecurity about themselves. Some people are insecure about the way they look. Some people are insecure about the way they perform their jobs. Like they're insecure about their marital life, their kids. They might be a good mother, a good father. Like there's all kinds of like different types of insecurity that one can deal with, right? And I chose like some of the pictures. There's I don't know if you guys can see like the one with that lady right there. So it says like not talented, not smart enough, not pretty enough, not good enough, and there's a lot of like insecurity also has a social aspect of it, because we create insecurities in ourselves because our inner critic that we have, which is, in a lot of cases is good, because having ourself as a critical of our actions, it's something that Spiritism teaches us. We have to evaluate our actions, and we have to think about like, are we doing the right thing, right? But at the same time, we cannot be overly critical of ourselves. Like we're in a journey. We're like a work in progress. Human beings. We're not done yet. So we're very subject to fail. Every single one of us will fail, and failing, it's part of the journey, right? So when it comes to failure, one of the most common, and I did some research and going a little bit beyond Spiritism to be able to talk here, and I can give you guys the references at the end if you guys are interested. But a lot of psychologists, they say one of the most common causes for insecurity is like failure and rejection. And then, when I start thinking about Spiritism and insecurity, failure can happen in this life, but also it can come like from past lives. Especially when you start seeing like kids with a lot of insecurity, like in a very young age. Like it's hard to say yes, it's something that they face in a past life, but it's possible. So, and all of us, like we probably face some sort of insecurity that comes, if you believe in Spiritism, that comes from like past experience and past failures or rejections, right? So, and like I said, failure is something that every one of us face every day. So I think the way we have to deal with failure is like give ourselves some time to heal. Like once a failure happens, we have to give ourselves some time to heal that, right? So it's not like we fail today on something, and then we automatically go, oh yeah, that was not a big deal. Give ourselves some time,
And accept that it's part of our nature, right?
It's part of our nature. We're not, like I said,
We're human.
we are humans. It's part of like the experience. We're here to learn, right? And like if we.
It depends on the way that you see the failure.
Yeah. So that's true. Like
if you see it as an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And typically is.
So with my students, I see this all the time. Sometimes they're afraid of answering anything. Some of them, they say, what if I'm wrong? I say, it's always better if you are wrong than not trying.
Yeah.
But it's hard for them. So Thomas Edison said
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I'll get there.
Okay.
I'll get there. Sorry.
You guys on the same page.
Yeah. So the other thing too is rejection, right? Like a lot of people get rejection, and like, maybe once they fail, they suffer some rejection from other people because maybe they made a comment. Like that's probably like what you see, right? Like in the school, they don't want to ask a question because they don't want to look like they're not as smart enough, or that they will be judged. They are afraid to be judged by other people. But in reality, that's a problem of the society. So if somebody has a question, no question is bad. A question is a question. And if you don't, sometimes like if you don't feel comfortable to ask a question in public, that's alright too. Like you will build up like your confidence to one day go and ask a question in public, but don't let that question pass. Like, after the meeting or whatever, go and ask the person like it, and then that feeling of like failure and rejection. We're growing that, we're learning, and then we're in the path to heal that and to overcome that failure, right? So and then talking about failure, so I'm gonna skip since Neri mentioned Thomas Edison. So he said, "I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work." So he tried from 1,000 to 10,000 times to make the light bulb. So he literally tried 10,000 times until he was able to make the first light bulb. How amazing is that? So do you guys think like every time he tried he was failing, or was he learning how to do it properly? Like he was,
or how not to do it.
how not to do it
Yeah.
exactly. Like I work with writing code a lot of times, right? And then every time I'm writing some code, if it works right away, the first thing that comes to my mind, there's got to be something wrong here because like, this is not supposed to work right away. So and then there's also like this quote here. You guys gonna see today. I got a lot of quotes. Many of life's failure are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. So so instead of like he was a guy that instead of giving up, he said, "No, I'm close. I'm gonna be able to turn on the light bulb." So and I mean, he invented GE, and GE is still around after I don't know how many years. So another person that was a failure, that considered a failure by a lot of people, is Albert Einstein. Did you guys know he only started speaking at 4 years old? 4 years old. Like his middle school teachers thought he was like a lazy student, and he was rejected from college because he has failed the entrance exam. And then even in college, people like really didn't think like he was a good student. So and even his father died believing he was a complete failure. So can you guys believe that if Einstein, which is considered probably the most recognized scientist of the 20th century, in that if it wasn't for Einstein, we wouldn't have computers, we wouldn't have any of the technology that we have, he was considered a failure. So if Einstein was considered a failure, how come like we should feel bad about ourselves? Because this guy, he was definitely, he was a brilliant mind. He was just probably like early in his life, he was not mature enough to realize that, or to explore like his full potential, right? So every single one of us have like an inner potential inside of us. We just need to realize what that is, right? And then he even like I could add more lines here. Like he worked. He had trouble to find a job in the first place, and then when he found a job, he was working on a patent office, like working with patents and stuff, for several years before he started his research that led to the theory of relativity. So he wasn't like a scientist like on the beginning. He became a scientist like after a couple of years after. But working with the patents also helped him to build the confidence. So he was dealing with like new things and new inventions that probably sparked this interest inside of him to pursue like the theory of relativity and many other things he worked on. So this is an example of a failure that the society considered a failure, but inside of himself he knew like he had something to give, right? And he never gave up. So he could, like at middle school, if he was even his dad thought like, oh yeah, you're a complete failure. He could take that as personal and then just live like a mediocre life for the rest of his life, and maybe hide himself in his insecurities and not do anything about it. But he decided to do something different. He decided to strive and became Albert Einstein that everybody knows and understands, right? So those are just two examples, and and the other thing too, like Saint Augustine. So this is on the Spirits book. Uh, you know, sometimes like a lot of the failures that we make, we go and notice, and this happens a lot. And you know, without thinking of it, uh, it makes us like create more failures. So it's important when we fail on something, it's important for us to recognize that, because recognizing a failure leads us to the success, right? So do you guys think like if Thomas Edison, every time he tried something, if he didn't think about like when he was trying to make the light bulb, if he didn't think about what happened that it didn't work, he would never be able to get to the point that he turned on that light. So he knew like, oh yeah, so what did I did wrong? So he would rethink, and then as he proceeds like in his research, he was able to finally get and turn on the light bulb. So failure can definitely create a lot of insecurity, but should we take failure as a no-go, or should we use it as a boost to move on and get close to our goals, right? So the other very common cause of insecurity is overly critical parenting. And you know, a lot of people criticizing your kids is something healthy, I think, in my opinion. But up to a point, right? There's a lot of there's a lot of kids, and there's actually like a research that was done in Singapore. It was like a 5-year study with like kids, and it was from the National University of Singapore. And they found that children with intrusive parents had a higher tendency of criticizing themselves and kind of like getting stalled. So parents that were either too pushy or like that were overcritical made kids that were very insecure. And also the same study, like those children demonstrated after anxiety and also elevated levels of depression. So being overly critical is important. I remember, like, my parents weren't like super critical. They worked, but sometimes it works too. Like because there's the opposite way too, where parents are too much protective of their kids, and they don't let the kids fail sometimes. I think like if you let your kid fail in something small, sometimes it's good because first it teaches the kid how to deal with like frustration, and also that life is not only about victories, right? Like life is also about failure. So learn the kids how to deal with failure. So to be there, and sometimes like when you see your kid that they will fail, you have to kind of like alert them in a nice way. As hey, I mean, I've been there, I have done this, I know like this is not gonna work, but if you want to try, give it a shot, right? But then after you can always say, hey, I mean, I told you it was your choice. So we had when we had our seminar back in October, and we had Daniel Assisi here. He made a very important point in one of the lectures that like the best way to criticize a kid is not really saying, oh yeah, you're dumb, or like you're not supposed to do that. Like he said, we should start teaching your kids about our feelings as parents, right? So when your kid does something to you that you particularly don't like, instead of saying like this is wrong, you can say, hey, by doing this, you're hurting my feelings. You're hurting me. So the kid starts to take more responsibility on their actions rather than just simply criticizing and saying this is wrong. Like you can actually use. You're not like using. You're being true. Like yeah, you doing this, you not cleaning your room every day makes me sad. Because I feel like we as human beings, we need to be organized, and we need to be needy and stuff.
Sometimes it doesn't work either.
It doesn't work. No, it probably doesn't work all the time. But like, I think we
That's easy.
we live in a society that we don't talk about feelings, right? Like, and feelings are something kind of personal But so I think like this is changing, and letting the kids know that you also have feelings is something good, right? That doing this or that hurts a feeling, right? So Givaldo Franco, I believe most of you guys know him. He's here every year. He's a very famous medium from Brazil, and he has his mentor Joana de Angelis. And a lot of like this particular lecture that I'm doing today, I based on this book called Self-Discovery: An Inner Search, and there's a comment about parenting. So Joana de Angelis say, if you do not, like when parents come to their kids and they say, oh, if you do not feed yourself, if you do not sleep, or if you not do well in school or whatever, daddy and mom will not like you anymore, right? Or yeah, or if you don't do this, you're not gonna, you're not gonna make it. Or like when they're misbehaving on a certain place, you kind of like say, oh yeah, I'll let you alone here. Like you're gonna be by yourself. That creates a lot of fear.
I think this kind of thing is more part of our culture, the Brazilian culture. Parents used to say that a lot, and say, "Oh, the boogeyman or the phone is going to."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the boogeyman will catch you.
Americans do that.
Yeah, the homem do saco.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom used to say that. So, but a lot of the kids, like, they're unable to digest that, right? Like, they are not, like, in their mind. And you can see sometimes, like, if the kid, when it gets dark, they want to get close to their parents. Like, they always want to be, so they're afraid of the dark. So, and it's part of, like, the maturation process. So, those types of things can lead to an insecure teenager and an adult that doesn't feel any kind of like credit or affection, right? So I mean, it's not everybody. This is not a rule that applies to everybody, but it can happen. So maybe rethinking a strategy is probably like, I guess like that's the message that they want to convey, right? Instead of like using those techniques, maybe reshape the message in a different way. So another thing that also leads to insecurity is perfectionism. And perfectionism is something that's hard to deal because a lot of people, they are so perfectionist that they'll take a 10x amount of time to do the same thing that a person that is not a perfectionist would take way less time. So the question is that we need to ask ourselves, a lot of those people, they feel like all or nothing feeling. Right, so it's either perfect or I'd rather not do it. Right, in a lot of cases, again, perfectionism is something good. Don't take me wrong; it's something important, but up to the point that starts like blocking yourself to move on. Right, because a lot of people would say, "Oh yeah, if I don't mow the lawn until like this little thing is gone, I'm not going to do it." So, and in a lot of cases, they end up not doing because they are so perfectionist that they rather not do it. So, and then, we have to think like, especially being spirituous and believing in what we learn here, our time here on earth is short, right? We have some people live like 70 years, 80 years, I don't know how many years I have left, but our time here is short, so it's precious. So when you start thinking about that, we might want to rethink if certain actions are worth. Is 10% of improvement worth my 10 hours more applying to a certain thing? Right? It's something that because the problem is if we keep this grows, right? Like perfectionism is something that it's exponential, and it starts implying our day-to-day life.
I have to disagree with you on something that you said. You said perfectionism is good. Joana de Angelis, the Plenitude, the book that we are studying, it's one of the causes of suffering. And so perfectionism is not good. I mean, that's how I think. I'm just giving you my opinion, and according to what I've been reading. And I think that doing the best you can always in everything is the best thing.
Absolutely.
I think. But perfection is the way it is that people get really. It's a sick. It's like a disease, a sickness, right?
Yeah.
And so it is not something good because I know some people
Yeah. So
like this, and they suffer a lot because they see things that we don't see.
yeah. So I think so when I say
It
it's
goes to the
good,
extreme, right?
because if we didn't have certain perfectionist people, like we wouldn't have iPhones. We wouldn't have, like, the humans need like a certain level of perfectionism. And if you think about, it helps.
I don't think that this is called perfectionism. I think they push themselves up, but many times they are not perfectionists in the sense of the word. You know what I mean? In their life,
Yeah, I'd
they
say
are
maybe
really
like
persistent in what they want.
Yeah.
But it's not. I mean,
oops.
so I just.
No, that's all right. And there's also another thing with perfectionism, which is the ego, right? So we learn a lot of. I'm not saying every perfectionist is egocentric, but ego is also somewhat related with perfectionism because, again, the same feeling that we talk about when we're talking about failure. So perfectionist people are typically, they are so perfectionist because they want their perception to the rest of the society to be up here. So, and that's somehow like tied to your ego, right? So, and ego, we have learned this at Spiritism, it's something that, it's one of the worst problems that human beings have. It's the ego, and that leads to like wars, that leads to, poverty, it leads to a lot of like different things. So, yeah, so, and the fourth thing that, one of the most common things is also social pressure. If you guys see, like, all those things are kind of connected together, but social pressure is something that is very important because sometimes you feel like you are like this blue fish in the middle of like, or the odd duck, right? Like every one of us heard the story of the odd duck when we were a kid. So social pressure is something that makes us very anxious. A lot of people, when they have like social events, they're so insecure about their looks or about like, the knowledge that they have to be able to talk in a certain party, or in a lot of cases, like when you have to present to people, especially like at work, if you have to do like presentation at work and you're seeing everybody there, there is that feeling of like insecurity and anxiety that can grow up that is really hard to deal. So social pressure is something that we need to think about, and the way to essentially like deal with that is really like, first, let's prepare ourselves. So if you have to do a talk in a place, take the time to learn what you're going to talk about. Don't concentrate too much in the things that you do wrong. Think about the message and how you want to convey that message, right? Don't think about the people itself. Think what you're trying to deliver there as a message. And also like talk back to your inner critic, right? So we tend to be too critic about ourselves. So we have to really think like, yeah, I mean, if I misspell a word, especially here in the U.S., like we, or most of us here, come from a different country, and then when we're here, a lot of people don't feel like confident to, oh yeah, I don't feel like my English is good enough to talk to a lot of people, and that's not true. You see, Einstein, he was born in Germany, and he was here. He was a very talkative person. So
Just going back to the point that the Chase disagree with what you said about perfectionism. I think the way you want to present is the perfectionism is something that is persistence. That when you persist in something to do good, like Arsen, Taman Arsen, so that is a persistence. But if you take for another step, like further than that, and then it's got a disease.
yeah,
I think.
yeah, no, that's a good point. So talking about social pressure, here's another person that unfortunately it's kind of blurred here. but I'll try to read for you guys. So did you guys know, like, on the beginning, Mahatma Gandhi, he was really afraid to speak a couple of words in front of the public. Up to the point that he says, like, this is his words: "My vision became blurred, and I trembled. Through the speech hardly covered a sheet of foolscap," he recalled. So he was very afraid of talking in public, and up to the point that he was a lawyer. So he moved to England, and then he was a lawyer, and he was like talking to the people and trying to convince people to change. Up to the moment that he found a cause, which was to release India from like the domain of the English, that inflamed his passion to be great, and then completely overrode like his anxiety, and like he saw that his goal was to help India, and he realized that the only way to do that would be overcoming those issues to talk in public, right? So his desire to set free India boosts his morale, and he used that insecurity, like he used that cause to help him overcome like this issue. So there's also like a quote here: "Be stubborn, because if you have considered the maximum number of people who benefit and wish to serve them by solidly banging the drum for what you know to be true." So he was very passionate about that, and he realized like his goal to set India free was much bigger than any kind of like issues that he had. So and that helped him to overcome those issues, right? So and then how do we like, what are the steps of what we need to do to overcome insecurities, right? So the first thing, and I'm gonna go back to the Spirit's book, question 919. What is the most effective method for guaranteeing self-improvement and resisting the attraction of wrongdoing? So Kardec asks that for the spirits, and then the spirits say, a philosopher of antiquity once said, "Know thyself." So Socrates, like this is a very well-known phrase from Socrates. Know yourself, and that's something that like I said, being critical about yourself is very important, because when you're critical about yourself, you start like learning more about who you really are, and it's very important nowadays that we, first of all, we acknowledge our fears, right? Knowing what is your fear is like a first step for you to face it, right? Because a lot of people like they have fear of everything, like. So you have to identify what causes you like a certain anxiety, or what is behind that. So identifying the fears is the first thing, and also knowing what you're good at, because maybe if you're good at a certain things, maybe you don't have to apply that much time becoming better in those things, and you can try to apply yourself in those things that you're not as good, right? So if you think like we're immortal spirits and we are learning, and in several lives. We have to use the time that you have here to improve the things that we're not as good. So we have to challenge ourselves every day to be better. And I'm not a person that meditates a lot, but I do believe in meditation. In my case, my meditation is when I'm riding my bike by myself. My mind is completely out of like whatever I do, and I start thinking about like things that I can improve. But a lot of the psychologists, and even like on that book that we mentioned, and we're going to mention more from Joana de Angelis, she says like meditation is a great way for us to know ourselves. So to essentially like, before we take a certain action, sometimes it's good to stop and think like, is that going to help me long term? Is that like what I'm supposed to do, right? Like, is that something that's gonna help me or the ones around me, or is that something that will really make my life worse? right? So meditating, and they say like 15 minutes of meditation every day is very healthy, right? Because it helps us to cope with the anxieties, and also I remember once like remember I told you guys like I'm a little bit insecure about my health. Sometimes like I feel things and then it's kind of like on my DNA. And then I remember once I was feeling like something, like my heart was pumping and I was very anxious. But it was good that I had the knowledge I'm an anxious person and sometimes. So I kind of like stopped and I did a meditation and it went away, like right away. So meditation helps a lot when you face in those kind of like critical situations, right? So I was looking for some quotes and then I found this quote that says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are weak. Our deepest fear is that we are we're powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frighten us." Right? So, meaning, our fear is not the failure itself, because failure is given for free. Like, if you don't do anything about it, you're not going to accomplish anything. Our fear is really the fact that we're really powerful. We can do. I wouldn't say like we can do whatever we want, because that's not true. But if we believe in what we can do, we can get pretty close to it. My own experience. And then the other thing, and this is Mandela, right? In his inaugural speech after 27 years in prison, he became fighting against the apartheid in South Africa. He became the first black president of South Africa, right? And then he said this: "We all have the right to be gorgeous, talented, and fabulous. And that thinking so will liberate others." So, I'm always like fighting against my weight. That's something that I have been doing like my entire life. And, I have, when I saw that a friend of mine lost a lot of weight, that motivated me to also try. So when you get better, when I saw my friend doing something right, he inspired me to do something right too. So when we do right, we inspire others to do right as well. So I found this very motivational, right? And talking about motivation, I want to talk about this guy here. His name is Caleb Laurel. There's a TED Talk. If you guys, I don't know if you guys like TED Talks, but there's a TED Talk talking, and that's how I learned about this story. But Caleb Laurel, he's a scientist, a genetic scientist, and he's also an ultra athlete. So, and then on the TED Talk, he mentioned that he was a scientist, and he used to be part of Tulsa University, and now I think he's a PhD student in Harvard. But he said he had a girlfriend, and he was kind of like overweight, and he was happy with the way he was and everything. But one day, like, they broke up, right? And then he felt like a tremendous despair, because remember, like, the rejection that we talked about, a couple of slides ago. So he felt like the rejection, and he felt like he wasn't good enough to be able to find another human being that would share the life with him, right? So he decided so he used that as a motivation to start like exercising. And then, like in the talk, he says after 77, so the first thing he tried to do like a 5K. So I'm not a runner, but he tried to do a 5K. After 1 mile, he was already like dying. After 77 days, he did a half marathon. After 88 days, he did like a full marathon. After 4 months, he finishing second a full triathlon. So he used like that insecurity to boost his morale to do well, right? But that only goes so far, because and I have faced something similar. So I had a family member that was going through like some tough times, and he was always like criticizing me about like being overweight and all that. So I said, hey, let's make a deal. So I'll do that for you, and you're gonna do something for me. And I end up like losing 40 pounds. So I used that as a motivation to, but unfortunately, that family member didn't do what he was supposed to, and then my motivation went down. So what he said is that those pieces of motivation help you to move forward, but the real motivation, and he said that what he did, and I don't want to give you guys. I want you guys to watch this because it was very inspirational. But he said one day he took 15 minutes. He sit in a dark room and he started like meditating about himself, and then he started meditating about a version of himself that would be better. So how would be a better version of himself? And then he starts thinking about all kinds of aspects of his life. So his health, like his looks, his his knowledge, where he wants to be. And then he took a note. So, and then every time he wants to, he's losing that motivation, he goes back to the note and look, like who I would look like or who I would be if I do. And then he used that as motivation too today. So I thought that was really powerful. So meditating and then, using, those fears and that insecurity to boost himself up and reaching like his goals. I think it was a really powerful message. Another important thing, and he mentions that, and also again, Divaldo Franco and Joana de Angelis in that book, setting goals. When we don't set goals with like timelines in our life just goes. Have you guys ever watched that movie Click from Adam Sandler? So if you don't have goals, our life just goes. Like we're so busy every day, like with our work, with our family, that life just goes. Okay? So if we don't set goals for ourselves, we don't move forward. And when we talk about goals, it's not really like just financial goals, or like we're talking about like goals to be more with your family, goals to spend more time with your kids, goals to be healthier, goals to be, even financials, goals to improve in your career, buy a new house, do whatever. When we establish a timeline and we work towards that timeline, that motivates us to move forward. And when we set goals, we need to set realistic goals, right? So, like in my case, if I say, yeah, I need to lose 100 pounds, I'm not going to do 100 pounds. Maybe if I set a goal, okay, I want to lose 30 pounds up to whatever, then when I get there, then I'll try to reach another goal, or, maybe change the way you look. I want to be healthy. Then maybe talk to someone, talk to a nutritionist, like do some action, right? And create like goals that you can actually achieve. So, Divaldo talk about that, working in your subconscious goals. So when you really want to do something, you set the time and set the occasion. This order is recorded in your subconscious, and once one task is completed, another is delineated and becomes feasible. So if I say today I want to do a triathlon next week, I'm not going to be able to do that. But if I start today, maybe I can do like a half marathon, and then, if you do step by step, you can do that. I remember, I don't know if you guys know Mount Hamilton in San Jose. So I was able to get up there once, and then my friend said, "Oh, we're gonna go to Mount Hamilton," and I had that in my mind, and I knew like it was like 2 months before, and I was like training on my bike almost every day, like up to the point that I was able to get there. I was never able to go back there yet, but it's still in my mind, and that's something that I want to do. So setting up goals and training and preparing for those goals is something very important. One step at a time. So he brings a kind of a similar message here too. Men and women conscious of the responsibilities that concern them set realistic goals that they conquer little by little, promoting themselves in the process of evolution. As they climb one level, another one presents itself, attractive and challenging. constituting an incessant stimulus to development of dormant powers. So we have a lot of dormant powers inside of us. We just don't know. It's in there. It needs stimulation. It needs work. But every single one of us have a power inside of us. Either be like a physical power, intellectual power, a power to convince people to do better. Every single one of us have that. It's in there. And we're getting close to the end here. I want to tell a little story. It's a story about a master and the cedar. So a master, a teacher, he realized there were a lot of like big fire close to his house. So he goes to this disciples and say, I want to go there and I want to start planting cedars, right? And then one of the disciples says, why do you want to plant cedars? Because it takes 2,000 years for them to mature. Why would you bother to plant? Like we're never gonna be able to use that. And then the master says, I'm gonna read it because it's yeah. So he said, why plant a cedar today if it takes 2,000 years to develop and reach fullness? So without being disturbed, the wise man replied, those who were burned never inform us who planted them, although they will always offer shade and life to us. Moreover, since they take so long to achieve exuberance, let us not waste time in order to delay development, right? So that's a story that it's also from Giovanni de Angelis. And then this was also like on the Caleb TED Talk. He said this quote here, and it's an anonymous quote, like I couldn't find the author, but and it kind of fits with like what we believe in spiritism. So he says like, someone once told me the definition of hell. The last day you have on earth, the person that you became will meet the person that you could have become. So so the last day that we have here, we know life continues, but once we pass on, we're gonna face like, because you know we have records in the spiritual world that tell us that was the plan for this incarnation. What did you do, right? So do you want to have a regret that we didn't do what we were supposed to do? Let's act today, you know, and knowing ourselves, like we mentioned before, it's critical for us to kind of like identify things that we need to improve on. So, and working on those things today is what we need to do. So, so this is my last slide. Also, a very famous medium from Brazil, Chico Xavier. I'm grateful for all the difficulties that I have encountered. If it weren't for them, I would not have moved forward. The comfort zone keeps us from walking. Even the criticism helps us a lot. So criticism from people that you trust is very important. So having people around you that you can give you constructive criticism is very important, because in a lot of cases people like to be praised. Who doesn't like to be praised for something they do? Everybody does, right? But a true friend, if you do something that is not right, he will come to you and say, hey man, I think it's probably not the right way to do it. And accepting that criticism is something important, because you know sometimes like people criticize you, and the way they deliver the message is not always like the best. But try to put a grain of salt on it and try to understand there's a message behind it, right? And sometimes try not to concentrate in the person itself, but on the message and how can that message help you. And also, like he says here, I'm grateful for all the difficulties that I have encountered, because without, like, we're here to go through, like, we're here to improve. Like, again, remember, like, the first question, what is the main goal for Spiritism? Is to make human improvement. So, in order to make us human improvement, we have to face challenges. So, keep that in mind, and while we're going through, like, challenging times, think about that. You know, the challenge will make you grow stronger, right? And that's it. And we're going to move forward to the passe now. Thank you.